in the business in terms of the knowledge and the experience that they have and the involvement that they've had with the private sector or the public sector for years now. And BIBF is proud to bring you Ms. Sarah Davis of CIPD Middle East. We also have with us today Ms. Amanda White, and she is of PSI Middle East. She's the Vice President of PSI Middle East. We also have with us Ms. Brenda Power, who is providing consulting services in the field of HR as well, and she's mainly based in the UK. We also have with us Ms. Angela Mulvey, and she's also a management consultant working out of the UK, and they're going to help us explore and examine the area of career growth opportunities, continuous professional development employees. We're also going to look at how virtual training platforms are being now widely targeted and used to develop careers for continuous professional development of employees, as well as the competencies that you require for career development. And again, we'll dedicate some time to that as well. So different times, I think, but this is as relevant as ever as workplaces continue to examine new systems of work and new ways of employment scenarios for the purpose of business continuity. It also remains a fact that we have to adapt to this new realities and new world that we live in, and basically make sure that these significant changes that are taking place as well take us back and make us look at how we should approach things, how career progression should be managed, how it should be pursued, and what means there are to actually fulfill our career goals. So for the next few hours, just under 2 hours, we're going to examine those areas. We're going to talk about career progression, the prospects, as well as the approaches to this aspect. But to start with, we of course have with us Ms. Sarah Davis of the CIPD Middle East, and she's somebody who's been connected with the region for a few years now. She's been actively involved in many projects in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, as well as Oman. She's based in the UAE, and she got her hands dirty with many things that have been going on, working with key organizations in the UAE as well. We're proud to also mention that she's somebody we have a strong association with, BIBF being an associate of the CIPD, and many of those programs being offered through the BIBF doors today. So to start with, Sarah, who again we're very accustomed with, is going to talk to us about how virtual platforms is becoming the norm in organizations, and how it's becoming something that is a part and parcel of the way forward, and how we seek those employment and development opportunities. Basically, she would be throwing light on how to facilitate effective learning in a virtual environment, something that's relevant to everyone, I think, to individuals, to the BIBF, to employers as well. So over to you, Sarah, for the next, let's say, roughly about just over 30 minutes. Sarah is going to be sharing some of her thoughts in this regards. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. I'll just pull my slides up, and Hannah will hopefully help me as well. Brilliant. Can you all see those slides? Hopefully.
Yes, it's coming up.
Fantastic, brilliant. So thank you so much, Yusuf, for a warm welcome, and it's just such a great pleasure to be here and supporting you. And it's wonderful, isn't it, getting people together like this and sharing our ideas and thoughts. And I was saying earlier, you know, one of the great things is the Q&A at the end, because I think this is where the richness comes out. As you said, a great friend to BIBF. You know, I work with CIPD. I'm based here in Dubai. I'm here in the office now, and obviously being asked to talk about one of my favourite topics that I'm really passionate about, and that is trends in virtual learning and development. I've actually just finishing leading a project for CIPD Middle East in Saudi, and it was a virtual learning project that started as a face-to-face project. It's a 2-year project, and we've had over 200 students shift from you know, face-to-face learning to online. So I've got the war, you know, the scars on the wall from having made this happen with my team, and it's been a really exciting journey. So I do feel I've lived and breathed some of this stuff. As you said, Yusuf, you know, the COVID pandemic has really shifted the way we learn, and learning development practitioners have really been put in the spotlight, and that's challenged our comfort zones. And, you know, we are having to become curious and embrace this new way of delivering learning in this virtual environment. So of course, this is going to be pivotal to employees, to career growth in our organisations, and one of those leaders for those opportunities. So let's just dive in. It's about 30 minutes. What I've planned to do is to really look at the broader digital learning and technologies context first. Then I'm going to grab some of our CIPD UK data about virtual learning. I've then identified some of the benefits and challenges of virtual. I'm sure, you know, as I'm talking through some of this, a lot of you on the conference are going to have loads of ideas as well. And then I want to go a little bit deeper from one of our pieces of research and really think about this facilitation of effective learning virtually, and thinking about it, you know, initially from the organisation perspective, and then the L&D practitioner. So if you're a manager, L&D, in HR, I really hope that you get something from this particular session. I'll be drawing on 2 pieces of research in the main that CIPD has done this year, and one of them is our annual CIPD Learning and Skills work report that came out with Accenture in May, and then the second one is something we brought out in March, which was the impact of COVID-19 on the L&D profession. So at the end of the talk, I'll give you some references, and then you can go off and have a look for yourselves what we've been saying. So just a moment really to think about digital learning from a bigger perspective. Today I want to focus on that learning, virtual learning environment, but I think particularly from a career growth perspective, career opportunities, and that broader CPD that we're talking about later, you know, you can see here that there are lots of different types of digital learning technology. And of course, you know, this is where we expect more continuum of this in the years that come. At the CIPD, we define digital learning as learning that is facilitated, enabled, or mediated using electronic technology, and that is for the purpose of training, learning, or development. So, you know, development, of course, being key with careers. And we talk about it in 3 broad categories. We talk about formal digital learning, so that kind of formal courses that I was using as my example at the beginning, and then that usually involves a fee. We also talk about informal digital learning, so that's where you get that informal workplace support, so that's usually linked to knowledge sharing. You know, you may use things like the game-based learning, the Twitter, the WhatsApp, some of these tools for coaching and mentoring, and then this blended approach, which is formal and informal. And of course, it's really interesting, isn't it? So of course, we've got lots of different supporting technologies, but actually there are nearly now twice as many today compared with just 10 years ago. So I think we're really seeing an avalanche of this, and of course there's a great variety that we can look at. I think we've seen real emphasis in the virtual space, but if we look at some of our organisations, probably less so in maybe the mobile apps or the chat box and this type of thing. What we see is that data usage and incidence of digital learning has steadily increased and used by over half of the organisations in 2020, and that's up from 29%. So that's a huge leap in just 5 years since 2015. And of course, this pandemic has prompted this faster and more widespread shift to digital learning. Let's kind of zoom into virtual, because that's one of the things we wanted to look at, and this is from our learning and skills at work report. And last year what we found, this is an annual report that we do, we found that just 36% of organisations actually reported that they were using webinars or virtual classrooms, and this now stands at 51%. So I don't think there'll be any surprises that we are seeing this shift. What you'll see from the graph on the left is that, yes, you've got loads of things happening there in terms of lots of people, 51% using this virtual learning, but less so those more emergent technologies. So I think that's a nice way of showing how far we've still got to go with all of this. This is our research, but LinkedIn Learning, they do a report every year as well, and they say practically the same. So their view is that blended online is here to stay, and there's going to be less instructor-led training and more online learning. And they say this kind of pivot that we've all done as practitioners to blended is definitely where we're going. And of course that makes sense in today's environment. Interesting as well, when I was looking at some McKinsey stuff as well, it's always good to sort of tap in, isn't it, to these other sources. And they said that in November 2020 last year, they did some research, and they actually were looking at how effective people were finding the virtual environment. And from their research, almost 90% of participants said that their experience was equal or more effective than an in-person event. And actually, this is the key for me. This bit around 80%, nearly 80%. Said that they built more collaborative relationships with their colleagues because of this different type of learning. And I think this is really our aspiration, isn't it? This collaboration is really key with this type of platform. Let's dive into some of the benefits and the challenges, and I hope there's some things going off in your mind as well here. And of course, that global connectivity, the collaboration that I mentioned, that's there for those that want it. I mean, it's really interesting. I've just started last year doing a coaching qualification, and I have peers from the UK, from Houston, from the Netherlands, and it really does make things quite exciting. And we also are able to do this just in time, continuous learning when the organisation needs it, and it does give us those references and repositories for catch-ups, for reinforcement of the learning, having reference for people. We can do it any place, any time, and more of that's going to be important, isn't it, with hybrid working as that comes. There's also this ability, I think, what I found in my recent project was we could also ensure that consistency. Obviously we could have sort of simultaneous unlimited employees. I've got a colleague who's doing some virtual learning to 30 countries at the moment, and it really helps, you know, if you're doing virtual properly, you know, this smaller bite-sized focused learning that's structured, where we're focusing on those learning outcomes for our learners, does bring some consistency of the delivery and you know, that uniformity that we also want in our organisations. Possibly that could lead to reduced in times, and that can also be a challenge we can talk about later. And then we also have this idea that we can actually you know, facilitate training and upskill at scale, and of course that's the attraction. If I think about when I first started my career, that was always the attraction. You know, in the 90s we were talking about this stuff, but now it's really happening, and actually, you know, we can't forget this human touch and the collaboration that I've mentioned. Of course, you know, the cost cutting, there's no per diems, there's no travel cost, etc, etc. We've been using WebEx, we're moving on to Zoom, and obviously it gives us the opportunity to track and log and share stuff later. So really there are lots of benefits, but of course, you know, making digital or virtual learning available to unprepared, unsupported learners is unlikely to be effective, and of course this is where the challenges come. So our virtual learning, you know, we must make sure that it is also adequately resourced, and we include that really vital learner support. We may have challenges in terms of the technology. You know, we were talking today as we were warming up for the conference, you know, pressing the right buttons, getting logged in, logged out. You know, some people may live in places where they don't have, you know, the super duper Wi-Fi, so that may impact. And of course, you know, that allocation of time, you know, making sure that just because we're doing this learning at our desks, maybe in sight of our peers and our managers, we are still giving it the time that it needs so that we can make that behaviour change, which of course, that's what learning is all about. So really this support being important, and for all you line managers out there, you know, really, you know, trying to get your buy-in is key if we are going to take our people through this career growth and through this development. There may be people who have lack of access to IT. I know when we started doing our work virtually, you know, most of our trainers hadn't had that experience, and I'm sure a lot of organisations went through this. So it really was about buddying up, supporting this type of thing. Also for learners, you know, what we find really useful is we always have a producer who can work with the facilitator and the learners, acts as a bit of a conduit between the two, so that we can make sure that the employee has the best experience possible, the best learning experience, which is still really important. Motivation can be a challenge as well, so we have to think about how do we reward, how do we motivate, can we use prizes and leagues in different functions of our organisation to keep people motivated and maybe vying a little bit against each other. And then finally, I think that this challenge, you know, we can't underestimate. And if you do go to our reports, you know, there's a great quote around someone saying, well, you can't just cut and paste face-to-face to virtual, and you know, that's just not how it works. And you know, this is a real challenge, I think, in terms of the lack of digital learning design capability in L&D teams. I think we made such an enormous shift. I know myself personally, I've been through that journey, and of course we've got to make sure we keep on that. We can't assume that people have these skills, and we must support and train and buddy and mentor, etc. So there's a lot to do, you know, there's a lot to do, and you know, this was also reinforced in the learning skills, you know, around some of these barriers of lack of learner time. You know, when we're working at home, it may be sometimes feel We don't have that time, we don't allocate that proper time to learning as individuals and as organisations. How do we keep people engaged in that learning process? Hence why we can't copy and paste, from face-to-face to virtual. And we need to really make sure that we have that really good, rich quality of content that resonates with our learners. They have the great experience and they really are helped and supported with the outcomes of the behaviour change we're looking to do. And of course, that idea of choices can also get in the way. Let's we looked at some of the benefits and challenges, and I urge you to think about your own experience and what you think they might be for you personally in your organisation, for your employees, as well as you personally. Let's now take it and do a bit more of a deep dive. I've taken some of this from the report, which was for the impact of COVID on the L&D profession. And first, I just wanted to talk about it from a holistic perspective. The research was all about gaining insight on how to deliver L&D effectively in a digital environment, and this was focusing on delivering formal learning and skills development training, and it was actually a focus group with some independent L&D professionals. This is where this has come from. I'm going to summarise some of those insights they came up with and that emerged from this study going through the learning cycle. Let me shine a light on some of those areas and some of the key points, because I'm conscious of time. So the needs analysis, I think this key thing here is around agreeing those learning outcomes with stakeholders. We have to be transparent about time and resources and the requirements for virtual and digital learning solutions. There isn't this quick fix that maybe some of our teams are looking for. So it's really important that we work to clarify and work with our stakeholders to create the best solutions that we can. And I believe the design phase is really where it's all at in terms of virtual. I think when we sit down then to deliver, it's almost too late. So it's really important that as I say, we don't think we can just convert face to face to digital and virtual, but we do have to reduce, simplify the content, and really need to give thought about how we are going to give this great learning experience, and think about what needs to change for this digital context. We also need to think about the activities, before we actually get into the virtual environment. Think about people and where they are going to be doing this learning. Are they in the office? Are they at home? Are they in a client site? They could be anywhere. And also think about how we're going to bring in that collaboration, that social learning, and also the individual reflection that we all need, and I'm sure we'll talk about later as part of CPD. I think as we also need to think about a modular approach, picking up on what the LinkedIn report said, integrating different modes of learning, I think is really helpful. Thinking about what it is we're trying to get across to our learners and our employees, and making sure we give that time and space for that application of learning as well. So this design piece I think is really important. We've talked about evaluation, is one of those things we talked about at 20 years ago as being key at each phase, and it is, but I think also now that design is key. Delivery, so people need to think about a pilot. So I've always done pilots. I did a pilot last time when I made that shift to virtual, and I think that's really important when you're trying out new things and testing these new delivery approaches. I think it's really important that we set out ground rules with our interaction with our learners, and obviously building rapport with learners and getting them to be active and participate is really key. I was really surprised, with my coaching course that, I was online, face to face, all day for numerous days as part of the program. And I was really surprised. I thought with something like coaching that would be difficult, but actually, no, I still felt I had that rapport with the people I was working with. And then, of course, this balance between using the exciting tech, we all love to do our polls and moving people around, budding people up within the tech, the frames of the tech that we've got, but also I think that skillful facilitation can't be lost. My view is prepare again, and practice as well. It's really important from the preparation for that delivery. So balancing maybe that facilitation that you would have in the classroom with those tech tools and creating that environment that is safe for our learners to share. Some topics they may need to be vulnerable, so creating that psychological safety is really important, and making sure that we actively promote collaboration and social learning throughout. It may be we have to take those breaks, so often it's really important, isn't it? We take those breaks when we need them, and that actually refreshes people so they can come back and they can tackle things with a renewed mindset. Evaluation, this does give us the chance for that sort of regular in the moment feedback. How's it going? Is this meeting the mark? Obviously continue working with our stakeholders to check in with them, and also that helps us to keep on improving our offering to our employees, and obviously linking all of these metrics as we would do normally to our wider organisation metrics and those stakeholders that they're working with. So I think on the organisation level there's a lot to think about, and there I'm sure you as well, as we're talking about these, can come up with your own, and think about maybe a question I might ask you is, which one is the most important phase of the learning cycle for you? Let's now sort of think about actually delivering L&D effectively, but let's think about it from a practitioner view. And I think more and more now, not even L&D practitioners like myself, but also managers are called on, aren't they, to get involved. And this was some research that was done, during the COVID. So, we did see a lot of barriers that came out of that research in terms of how people were feeling, because it was quite a stressful time for many. I know certainly I felt exhausted, trying to make that shift with my project, and I didn't have the skills at the time, and it took time to build those skills, work with the team and work with our learners to ensure they had a great experience. Obviously, that comes from within, and it's really important, isn't it, that we look at ourselves as managers, as L&D practitioners, think about our own well-being, and then also we do have to practice what we preach as practitioners, and that idea of prioritising our own learning, being curious is really important, and that ability to step out of your comfort zone. It's not easy, I don't think, delivering online, and I think it does take that effort, and it's very interesting as well, just thinking about going back to that face-to-face delivery. I had another colleague who did some face-to-face a couple of weeks ago, and again making that shift back will also be interesting. But that idea of what are we comfortable with, and always pushing ourselves and learning from our failures and learning to listen to ourselves and being kind to ourselves. I think energy is important, and it's exhausting delivering online, I think, and it's really important. I protect my diary, even when I'm doing events like this. It's really important to protect that energy, protect our time, and get into that zone where we can be fully focused on our learners and our audience. But how about yourself? Were there any key messages that you learned from either being part of some learning virtually or delivering it? What would be your learning from all of this? It's a lovely, as part of our research, there are a really nice selection of case studies, and I've taken one from the cooperative group, and it really resonated with me because it was all about them pivoting. You know, they had an LMS set up, they had, you know, just restructured their L&D teams, and they themselves, you know, made that shift. The cooperative is a big food retailer in the UK, so it employs 63,000 people, and of course, you know, with food shortages, and they also have a funeral service as well. It's another part of their business. So you know, they were pretty busy. So they had some top tips that they share from their case study, from their learning, and just, you know, really resonating with me, but also really reinforcing, I think, those key points around remembering that it's different for face-to-face, being really clear about that mix of what we include in content-wise and the modes of learning, thinking about internal training. And I would hate for that bit to be lost, you know, as we kind of move on as an L&D teams, and you know, really being careful about what a successful learning experience looks like for the learners. And for me, you know, we go back to the learner, we want to focus on the learner. You know, to me, it's all about a learner-centric approach and being able to set up expectations with them in advance so we can support them through those journeys, and of course thinking about that reinforcing of the learning and how they apply what they've learnt and their skills back in the workplace. So these were things they wanted to share from their journey, and they looked at their induction program, they looked at some manager training, and this is what they came out with. Starting to sort of wrap up really, and I really think it's important, you know, we've kind of looked at some of the pros, the cons, you know, done a bit of a think about the organisation perspective and the individual, and I think, you know, let's think about where we're going towards, what's the future going to look like. And I guess, you know, some of the things I would just emphasise is this idea that you know, work will continue to be disrupted, as Yusuf reminded us. You know, there will be skills gaps that we have to tackle, and we know about that, don't we, from the World Economic Forum research that we've heard many times. And of course, you know, being able to tackle these skills gaps and not as well as grow careers within our organisations is going to be key to any organisation's success. And of course, that skilling, reskilling is really high on many organisations' agendas. And I think we also just need to bear in mind our L&D functions and our managers. You know, I really believe that role of the manager is key, particularly as we go into hybrid working in many organisations, and, you know, evolving the role of, I think the L&D role will just, you know, continue to evolve, the function will continue to evolve. I think it will, you know, the idea of being a consultant will be more and more prevalent. We will have to be more, you know, digital savvy. We're going to have to harness this, the power of data even more, and you know, really not just shape the solutions, but look at performance generally. If you're part of an organisation, you know, think about your own L&D people, and think about what they need, and let me just move my slide here. You know, do think about what they need. My mouse is going mad at the moment. And let's see, lost my mouse. Yeah, think about your L&D teams. Think about, what they need. We know that learning is changing. We are going to have different learner priorities and challenges that just come naturally from this new digital age. I think that onboarding people, keeping our people and helping them to be happy and productive in the teams, and obviously promoting health and well-being is going to be key. And of course, this remote manager dimension, I think, is going to be our next challenge and our next change. So again, fitting in with careers, how do we get people ready for that? And of course, we have to adopt this mindset that helps us, and we have to work with people to understand that. And then finally, I think it's all about relationships and human connectivity, and I suppose that would always be my takeaway from I know I'm talking about virtual trends, but I think we can't lose this. Relationships and human connectivity are just even more crucial, and we need to be thinking about those relationships, those cultivating those relationships, those networks in this digital world is just going to be more and more paramount. So let me wrap up, and you'll see on the slide hopefully some questions. Hang on, let me just go back. So I just wanted to wrap up really from looking at the future, coming back to ourselves and our own individual reflection in terms of how we've worked in the past year or so. What have we done in terms of learning, what's worked, what hasn't, where have our challenges been, and where have our strengths been, and where has our confidence been, whether we're personally delivering or whether we're organising teams to deliver. What can we learn, how are we going to be more confident at some of this stuff, and what kind of skills and knowledge have you learned and have you acquired as a manager, as a leader, as an L&D practitioner, as an HR practitioner, and how are you going to leverage those for yourselves? So a moment of individual reflection I think is really key. I'm sure you'll do something at the end of the day, and really just to leave you with our CIPD profession map, which for anybody in the HR profession, here I put up the standards for the specialist knowledge learning and development. This is a really go-to place for anything around careers and HR. Really helps you to map out your journey in terms of the core knowledge, behaviours and specialist knowledge you might need. And we have that foundation level, which is a new level for us, and I really believe that even managers should be thinking about this level now. Those people who are looking after those people managers, I think it's really beneficial. And we have made some updates to the map just last month, so it's a couple of years old. And we again, CIPD realising the sort of changes in this digital world, we made some updates around the health and well-being and people practices. So do have a look at it if you have time. And here are some references, so do get on our website, grab some of those skills, grab some of those reports, have a look, and just thank you really to everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. That was really, truly very comprehensive in terms of, there was so much in there, I think, in terms of how virtual and basically online learning is becoming the way forward, and how more and more companies are adapting this, not just because there is a temporary situation that they need to respond to. I think we're seeing it ourselves, Sarah. The appetite of our clients is changing drastically, and that means some serious questions as well. And part of what it means is that they can now seek the development that they need, the input that they need from anywhere in the world, and those who employ this technology better will basically prevail, like at the receiving end as well as the sending end, in terms of how for example, us, BIBF, can continue to operate in a world like this and make the best use of the technologies available. It's just a different world, I think, and nothing will go back to being the same, and we're not going to see what was prior to the pandemic in terms of, you know, people making time to go on training for days and days, leaving their office spaces. I think employers are realizing as well now that not just that they can just transform the training to online platforms, but also to integrate that more into the working life of the employees as well. I have one question, and that's from Nasser, Sarah, and basically Nasser is talking about, I think you touched on that area in more than one way in your presentation. But Nasser's question is on how to make training more interactive, and we do seem to have this impression that a facilitator used to have more tools in hand. Maybe they were more of a comfort zone, and that was the way, that was what they needed to do. How do you bring that level back, let's say, or even improve it, interactivity? You've mentioned some things when you were talking about facilitating effective learning and development, but over to you. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a great question, isn't it? And it's the holy grail sometimes, isn't it? Around how do we do that? And I believe it's a blended approach. So I think if we can do a bit of classroom and a bit of virtual, I think that would always be the dream for me personally. But I think even virtually, we have so many tools like whiteboards. We can group 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, 10 people together. We can get people sharing. We can do boards. We can do case studies. We can do lots of different kind of problem-solving activities. We can get people to do things, prior to the session, come back. I mean, I'm a great believer in solving real life business problems. I think that's really important, and I think that's a really great way also to involve managers, so they feel they're getting this value from learning from their person as well, who may be attending the training. So a great one about bringing real life organisation problems to the table. I think another thing that is important is actually spending that time to get the rapport with the group first. So I think if you don't have the basics beforehand, we always classically with training 20 years ago, we always talked about the WIFM. I don't know why I'm there. If I don't know what's in it for me, if I don't know what I'm going to get out of it, then you can make it as interactive as possible. But that question has to be answered. So I think maybe, it's a great question, Nasser, and I think it will be different for different things. I mean, I was really shocked with my coaching program, I'll be honest. It's a really senior level coaching program. I was just thinking online, it's just not going to work. And I feel closer to those people than the people I work with, every day in terms of just the richness. So I think, about selecting the right thing for the right people. A WhatsApp group may not work for leaders, but that's a great way for maybe less experienced people. And I think it is about also asking your learners, as I say, I go back to that learner-centric piece, actually what would work with the learners. I love the idea of also user-generated content, that also brings its own problems. Let me bring my solution, but also let me take a video of how I would do something, actually doing something on the job, and people creating their own stuff and sharing the relevant content as well. So I think there's lots of things to try, but it will depend, on the audience as always, and that goes back to whatever type of need it is, from the people, from the organisation and the people specifically. So we'd always want to go back, I'd always want to go back to that,
I'm just looking at the list of attendees, and I can recognize at least no less than 15 trainers in attendance, and it just leaves me to wonder what they think, because they've been on the ground for a year and a half, and they've been through the whole thing. And to be honest with you, the learning has been steep, to say the least. And we're in a much better way now compared to like a year or a year and a half ago, how people quickly adapted to the new world. I think not just, I mean, the emergence of technologies and online and electronic learning has also been coupled with trainers being asked serious questions about their role going forward. Like, I mean, in the next paper, we're going to talk about emerging competencies and what's going to be most relevant and what not. But, you know, that question has been asked of trainers as well, how to transform themselves to be part of the new world. And I think we have to spare a thought for them, because I think it's been phenomenal how they themselves have evolved. Both they were affected by this technology, but in how they also influenced the use of the technology. So, Sarah, that was very interesting, and I cannot thank you enough. I really appreciate that. I think there was so much to take away. That was intense. I think that's something that's...
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, totally. I think this is fantastic and a great start to the day. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Sarah. I hope this is. I hope there's never an end to the work that we do with CIPD. I think as a global HR organization, you must be having sleepless nights over the last 2 years in terms of the implications that you have seen in the field as well. So all the best to yourselves, and we're so happy to continue to be your partners. So all the best. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Good one. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for that. I think, like I hinted a little bit earlier, we need to stop and think, you know, what's relevant next and what's not. What are the competencies that will be, say, required over the next 10 to 20 years, and what's out of the door? And this has been changing rapidly. I think a few years ago, I remember I used to be part of another organization, and we used to think about future skills a lot, and the cycles were a little bit longer. I think right now things are changing very rapidly, and I think the edge will be with those who actually adapt to this situation, and they're able to actually be part of the new world of work. So we have with us Miss Amanda White, who's going to be talking to us, and Amanda works for one of the I think the world's premier occupational psychology organization, which is PSI, another organization entity that we're also proud to be associated with at the BIBF. And many of you who actually work in the field of HR development will be familiar with PSI. Amanda is somebody who's based in Dubai, and she's been a key individual. She's the vice president for PSI. Her passion lies in the design of leadership and development programs, cultural change, talent management, as well as succession planning. So she dedicated her life to occupational psychology, which is an area that we ourselves have been seeing increased interest, you know, even amongst clients who want to make sure that they're investing right and they're investing well, and they're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of the training and how relevant is what they're doing to the future needs of the individuals as well as of the organization. So recently PSI released a study to kind of reveal the most important skills needed in the coming few years, and according to them, of course, competencies that were held so much in value 10 or 15 years ago are no longer. They're being replaced by new ones, and their study, of course, is based on the research findings, that the work, the assessments that they do around the world. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you looked at 10,000 samples,
yes.
Amanda?
Yeah, 10,800.
Fantastic. Well, I'm not gonna spoil the fun anymore. Tell us all about it. Who's the weakest link? Who's the strongest link? What competencies are most relevant, Amanda? Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to put my slides up, and if you could confirm you can see them in a second.
Sure. We can see that, yes. Go ahead.
Fantastic. So you can see it all, and you can see me still.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you, everybody, very much indeed. And thank you, BIBF, for inviting me to share this research. As Yusuf just said, I'm going to be going to looking at the seismic changes that have been happening over the past 10 years, and of course, in the 18 months just recently, and ask what have these changes meant for us in the world of work? And more importantly, what do we see in terms of the future? And as you've just mentioned, of course, just to put my comments into some form of context, we are probably one of the world's largest groups of occupational psychologists. So we specialise in the assessment and development of individuals, of teams and of organisations. And today we are in 21 different countries. And of course, here in the Middle East, we work across the GCC region, as you can expect. And like you, I'm sure you've been noticing a lot of change, in particular in the last 18 months. And in fact, I want to start by actually casting your minds back. Would you believe these innovations I'm showing you right now have all come to the market in the last 10 years alone? We've got everything here from selfie sticks to driverless cars, petrolless cars, beefless beef burgers, 3D printing, drones, smartphones, smartwatches. These are all come to pass in the last 10 years. And as the chairman of the and the founder, in fact, of the World Economic Forum said, we are actually living right now in the fourth industrial revolution. And if I could cast your mind back to the first industrial revolution, of course, in the 18th century, that's when we first got involved and we became mechanicalized for the first time with the steam engine. Then, of course, at the end of the 19th century, we started to see electricity coming into play for the first time, again, making huge changes to the way in which we produce things and the way in which we actually drive some efficiencies in our work. And then, of course, in the 1950s, we started seeing computers for the first time. And in fact, just for me, actually, graduating and coming into the world of work in the 1990s, computers still weren't really that prevalent. So we had to make some huge changes and automation. We saw huge changes to the banking sector, to the telecommunications sector, to a number of different industries. And here we are in the fourth industrial revolution. And really what we have here is this blurring of boundaries between the physical world, the digital world, and the biological world. We have the artificial intelligence for the first time. We have genetic engineering, we have robotics, we have the Internet of Things. And essentially, these things are making huge impacts to our roles every day. More and more roles are disappearing, more and more roles coming into play. And I think for everybody, there's been a great deal of change as we become more efficient. We're looking for more efficiencies and changes to the way in which we work every day. And of course, then you add the pandemic to all of this. So we haven't even talked about the pandemic. The pandemic has brought about a permanent shift towards more flexible working. And for a lot of people, that will be remote working. And we've got, certainly in PSI in the States today, we now have people who are now remote working going forward. Here in the UAE and in our team in Saudi and in Abu Dhabi and as well as Dubai, we've now actually said to people, you can choose whether you work from the office or work from home. And in fact, in our UK office, they've actually closed one of our offices. And now we have redesigned the whole space so that people can actually just come in and go, and it's temporary workplace design going forward. And I think as PSI, we're unlikely to go back to the way things were actually. And we're finding a lot of our services actually work better online. And I think, as Sarah just mentioned, you know, some of those courses have lent themselves actually better online, if certainly as much as, you know, as perhaps in person. We found in particular things like our assessment centres actually work better online. We're not quite there with our behavioural training and with our leadership retreats. We have run them online, but I think there still appears to be a bit of a preference for the behavioural work, not so much for the qualifications and the more training, if you will. I found that actually clients have been more than comfortable to run those online. So against this backdrop, obviously, we're trying to not only learn new technology, we're also trying to learn new ways of working. And we're trying to learn new ways of exchanging information. And we are seeing, as Sarah mentioned earlier, we're seeing this increased focus on well-being, on resilience, on how we better manage our time at home and our own space and literally our own time. You know, a lot of my colleagues have got children, for instance, and at 4 o'clock it's tea time. They've come back from school. So they're working perhaps in the evening and they're having those couple of hours off in the middle of the day. So actually, we're trying to work out how we're actually going to manage our time and how we're going to protect our space, how we're going to manage our emotional well-being. Equally, we were having to rethink as managers, actually, how do we induct and train new people in the workplace if we don't see them as much? I've actually got 2 new employees in Saudi, one of which I've never met. And that's a huge change. Clearly, I would have actually had a one-to-one with them. I've probably taken them out to lunch. They would have had those opportunities with the water cooler moment. They would have been able to sit and they would have been able to listen to others. And they're actually working from home. So how we induct, how we train, how we manage new recruits, how we then go on to performance manage and ensure that we're not just treading water, but actually we continue to raise the bar. That's going to be quite a big process for managers to actually manage the ongoing performance of our businesses and the ongoing engagement of our businesses. So equally, we have to start rethinking our competencies. We have to start thinking about what sorts of behaviours do we need from our leaders and from our staff. How do we actually want them to be behaving going forward in order that we reach our mission and our vision and our strategies? As I said earlier, we don't just stand still going forward. So as Yusuf just mentioned, we conducted some really interesting research into competencies, not just about the competencies of the past, but the competencies of the future. We were keen to understand, had they changed? So I'm going to start by actually just defining what I mean by competencies. Competencies are effectively a reflection of your values, which are in turn a reflection of your mission, your vision, and your strategies. How we need to behave, how are we going to get where we want to get, is very much about how we articulate those competencies. And I'm going to pay homage to Sarah here, and I'm going to use the CIPD definition of a competency. They can be defined as behaviours and, of course, technical attributes as well, where appropriate, that individuals must have or must acquire to perform effectively at work. And I think it's also worth mentioning, certainly in the 20 years that PSI have been here in the Middle East and the 70 years that we've been engaged around the world, that actually every organisation is slightly different. We've all tried different set of competencies and we all articulate those competencies slightly differently. But the main thing we have in common when we get it right is that we use those competencies to actually inform all of our talent processes. In other words, we recruit and we select against those competencies. We performance manage against them at the different levels of the organisation. We set up learning and development programs around them. They inform what it is that we're actually going to be doing with our teams. Equally, we start talking about who's ready for promotion, who's ready for leadership, who's ready to become a successor. Really depends on how they really kind of encapsulate and then demonstrate those competencies at work. Because of course, how they behave at work really informs the organisational culture. And thus, you know, therefore it clearly underpins our leadership development initiatives and therefore in due course our pay and reward strategies as well. Competencies really do sit in the middle. And I'm clearly going to be talking about behavioural competencies today, but equally you can add to these technical competencies for different roles across the organisation. Now, a number of our clients haven't gone this far to actually articulate their own frameworks yet. So a number of them actually use the PSI Competency Framework. So I'm going to use these because I'm going to be talking about the research that we've been doing. So just to give you an insight into what the PSI framework looks like, it covers 3 key domains of work performance. From the connecting, this kind of communicating, gaining support, working proactively with people. The piece around transforming, that creating change, making decisions, providing leadership. And the piece around delivering results, that achieving mindset, overcoming obstacles, adjusting to change. And we've actually got a framework that we clearly keep updating continuously because some of the language that we're using today is new. Some of those competences you'll see shortly are also quite new. The PSI Competency Framework actually is 44 competencies clustered under these 3 sectors. And a number of our clients use this, as I said, to form their 360 surveys. And in fact, we use them in assessment centres. We use them for all sorts of different activities, including, structured interviewing, etc. Clearly, as I mentioned before, clients also use their own competencies. But for this research, what we actually did is we looked at 10,286 360 surveys that have been conducted in the last 10 years. And we said to ourselves, can we see the change that's going on right now? Can we see the evidence of this 4th industrial revolution in the competencies that our clients have chosen from our framework over the past 10 years? And what we did is we correlated that with some really key interesting research. Sarah's already mentioned one of those, the World Economic Forum Future of Job Report 2020. We also looked at the Institute for the Future, Future Skills, that was published in 2016. And we looked at the OECD publication, we looked at the UK Commission for Employment and Skills, and we also looked at the PwC Workforce of the Future report. So we took into consideration other research and we took into consideration what our clients were doing. And we said to ourselves, can we really see the difference? And more importantly, what are those attributes that are going to be so important for the future? So let's start by looking at the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, the top 7 competencies used by all of our clients across 21 countries are these: coaching and developing others, results focus, customer focus, teamwork, communication, organising and prioritising, interpersonal sensitivity. And as you can see, these are 7 really robust competencies. I've got no issue with any of these competencies. You can also see how 5 of them are really talking to people. They're really reflecting the people-focused aspects of performance, whilst only 2 really focus on what I would call task-focused success factors, if you will. And I think this strong focus has come about by the fact that in the last decade in particular, we've seen a lot more cross collaboration between departments. We've seen a lot more cross-functional project teams being established, and a lot more focus on collaboration and growth through collaboration. And I think we've also seen in this process a little bit of the breakdown in terms of these hierarchical structures. Certainly as more and more technology has started to come through. You know, how can we really leverage the team strengths? I don't profess to have all the information as a leader. So I think we've seen that certainly in the last decade, and these are the 7 competences, as I say, that we have been noticing. So then we start looking forward. What are the things we've been seeing recently, and what does the research tell us about what recently, and what is it going to be looking forward? What is it going to be looking forward? God, that's a tongue twister. So the 7 competencies that we're noticing and that we're seeing in the research are these: critical thinking, learning agility, digital dexterity, no surprise there, building relationships, embracing diversity, resilience, and change orientation. And we can see it. It is so clear in our surveys. It's also very clear in the things that we're measuring for clients using their own frameworks. And it's clear looking at the research that these are the competency sets that we all need to start embracing for the future. So in fact, when I look closely at some of these choices of late, we've discounted the leadership competencies. So I just want to make that quite clear. The leadership competencies of the past are still prevalent now, and I don't think they're going to go away. So we're looking really on new themes arising as opposed to repeating some of those. So let's have a bit of a deeper dive and find out what we mean by critical thinking and learning agility and digital dexterity. What we're talking about here is critical thinking. It's when faced with complex or ambiguous problems you've not seen before, managers need to be able to appraise data and information for a range of sources, and they need to quickly understand and take decisions and question those ideas and question those assumptions. And I think clearly what we're seeing now is that we are in, as we're in an increasingly interesting and fast changing world, and we can see why critical thinking would clearly be important in that context. Equally, this piece around learning agility. In this rapidly changing work context, to be effective now, people must critically and objectively evaluate their experiences. They must also apply their learning to new situations and opportunities, and equally be more available to those people who may have answers. And certainly this is a lot of the work that we're doing, certainly with leadership retreats and leadership development at the moment, is we're encouraging leaders to think more broadly, to actually be a facilitator rather than someone who knows it all. Because actually you're not going to know everything going forward. You can't possibly know. So how can we facilitate and learn together? Thirdly, this piece around digital dexterity. The pace of technology adoption and disruption is expected to continue. And that was across all research that we have not only conducted ourselves, but all those research points I mentioned just now. With the increasing interest in technology, in artificial intelligence, in robotics, employees need to be able to grasp and leverage new technology rapidly. So increasingly, we're seeing this kind of digital dexterity being measured not only in our surveys, but also in our line manager interviews that we might conduct, in the structured interviews we might conduct. There's far more emphasis now on having that digital dexterity as well. So that fourth competency, building relationships. Again, probably no surprise here, with increasing automation, we're likely to focus on areas that employees can perform better than machines. We're not going to try and beat the machine. The machine is obviously gathering pace and replacing quite a lot of jobs of the past. I think we can see a lot of jobs disappear, and we've probably already seen a lot of jobs disappear, but certainly more jobs will disappear over the coming few years. So we're not going to try and beat machines and what they can do, but we are going to try and think, what is it that we differentiate? What is it that we do differently? And the reality is that we build relationships, and we have that personal and that more personal touch, if you will. And of course, with this greater remote working and hybrid working likely to remain, there's a lasting need for employees to be proactive in how they communicate. And in fact, we've changed the word communication and influencing, which was our old competency of the past. We now talk about proactive communication. It is no longer just good enough to be able to communicate, but are you going out there and make it your mission to communicate what's going on around you? And collaborate clearly and connect more easily with people. And of course, gain trust more quickly in order to build effective relationships. And interesting, another survey that we're doing right now on leadership, we're doing another study on leadership skills of the future. What has been very interesting in this process, we've not only obviously surveyed leaders, but we've also surveyed followers, if you will, staff. And the sorts of things they're telling us, which I thought was quite interesting, I thought that COVID would have actually made communication worse, but actually everyone's saying it's actually made it easier, and they're getting on better with their line managers before, because for the first time their line managers are calling them at home and saying, are you okay? For the first time, line managers are stepping up and making communication much more obvious. They're being more proactive with their communication. And for the first time, line managers are saying, do you have the children at home? They can see their cats and their dogs, and they're actually building a bit of a relationship with people at home. So actually, employees are reporting that they are feeling quite engaged at present. But as line managers, clearly we need to keep this up. And proactive communication is as a key part of this kind of building relationships. Okay, the fifth competency, embracing diversity. And I think we all know there's strong evidence to suggest that diverse and inclusive organisations achieve better business performance. And the D&I in gender, of course, is very obvious everywhere at the moment. We need to not only to think about this in terms of different nationalities and different gender and different experience, but we also need to think about this in terms of a range of perspectives. And actually, as managers, as I mentioned earlier, we can't expect to have all the ideas. How can we create ideas and solve business challenges together? How can we really leverage everyone's perspective? How can we treat people fairly, regardless of their background, so that they're not intimidated about sharing their ideas? And I think this is a really big piece of work, again, that we've been doing with some organisations quite recently about training line managers in coaching skills. How do we get our line managers to start thinking and to start giving feedback and to start listening more proactively, to creating that environment of psychological safety where people can make mistakes, people can put forward their ideas, people won't feel chastised or laughed at, they will actually feel valued and will have their comments and their ideas embraced. Okay, the sixth competency is around resilience. And I touched on this earlier, this whole idea of employee well-being and mental health has become really key as people are now working from home. They're working, or perhaps they're working a blend hybrid, if you will. People need to be able to cope with setbacks. They need to be able to cope with change and be able to bounce back effectively and build up their own sense of personal resilience. And the great news is resilience is not like a personality attribute, this one. Resilience is something you can really kind of improve and grow through awareness. And it's something we've built questionnaires around, and we've now built programs around, because with greater awareness, we can really transform people's resilience and well-being. And finally, the seventh competency, clearly around change orientation. With the rise of digital, with the rise of automation, with the changing jobs, with the changing organisation structures, the change in the way in which we're working at the moment, employees ultimately need to maintain this kind of positive attitude to work and to change. And embrace change and appreciate the opportunities that it might present. And that, again, is something that we can really coach people around, understanding their role in change and raising their awareness around change. So those are the 7 competencies of the future. And I think you'll agree, resilience, change, building relationships, critical thinking, learning agility, digital dexterity, and of course, embracing diversity are all going to put us in very good stead for the future. So if I look at the key conclusions, certainly of our research and really of me today working through to prepare this presentation today, essentially, I think that the opportunity for upskilling and reskilling, of course, is getting shorter as more and more technology is coming on board faster. So to Sarah's point, this just-in-time training, this kind of bite-sized training, I don't think we're going to be sending people away for 3 days at a time anymore, or not as much, perhaps. We're going to be having these kind of bite-sized modules, some of them online, some of them in person, perhaps, but it's going to be quicker. We've got to be quicker. I was saying to someone the other day, actually, when I want to learn to cook salmon, I don't go on a cookery course for 3 days. I go on the internet, I look at a YouTube video for 2 minutes and I can work out how to cook salmon. And I think we need to think about the kind of bite-sized training modules. The 7 competencies of the future provide us with a robust foundation to help people adapt for the future. And we need to focus not on some of those outcomes and learning, in my view, but actually in this learn to learn skills. You know, how can we better prepare ourselves to learn to learn? And we talk about reflection, we talk about perhaps journaling, we talk about setting up the right environments for people to learn on the job and to feel safe, proffering their ideas and being heard. And it's quite interesting because while 66% of the organisations surveyed said they understood and recognised the return on investment in upskilling, actually employee engagement is lagging. Only 44% of employees are taking up employer-supported opportunities. And I think we therefore have got to put some real effort into really engaging people into learning. If we want to keep up with this 4th industrial revolution, we need to really bring this home for people. Businesses require this fast and agile and coherent workforce investment strategy. You know, if we are going to include reskilling, we're going to include obviously how we motivate and engage. We're going to have to include things like how do we acknowledge and really celebrate achievement as well, so that actually we have a coherent workforce investment strategy moving forward. It's not just thinking about this course over here for this guy and this course over there for that guy. What are we going to be doing this year and next year? Who are the people in scope for assessment individually, from a team, from an organisation point of view? And when we do talk about organisation, you know, how can we train all leaders in that so that we actually do achieve culture change? And excuse me. And finally, that leaders can ensure the success of these workforce strategies by directing the transition with employees with empathy, by really appealing to the workers' sense of purpose, meaning and growth and achievement. Because undoubtedly, across the board, we had percentages 80 to 90% of people saying, you know, they really buy into this sense of purpose. They really want to understand what this means. They really want to understand the bigger picture, and they do want to grow. So how can we as leaders, how can we as organisations really kind of get them on board, feeling safe and managing that transition with empathy? So I'm available for any questions, Yusuf.
Really, Amanda, thank you very much for that. It kind of leaves us with a lot of thought. It means a lot of different things to who you are. You know, whether you're somebody who wants to sort of get on with your own career and get to the next level, and how these competencies can make you a valuable asset to your organization, but also in terms of policy making and where training spend goes, and where the focus of people who provide the training as well as employers towards building these competencies and enhancing them. So it leaves us with much thought. But one question that came up, and Amanda, I think somewhere there you addressed that, but it's from Anonymous and says, what if the organizations, I'm going to read it as is because I think it's a loaded question.
Oh dear.
Yeah, okay, what if the organization's culture doesn't support adaptation of such competencies? And then it ends with the reality hurts. Yes. How does culture affect that, Amanda? Do you need a certain culture to be adaptive to such competencies?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question, because this is exactly what we are finding now, actually, and we've been finding really for the past couple of years, I would say. As psychologists, obviously, we're interested in creating an environment where people are happy at work, people are growing at work, people are, you know, being fulfilled at work. And essentially what we have is we have and I'm not going to obviously mention names and point fingers, but we do have a kind of a culture here, certainly in a lot of, I would say, government, semi-government sectors more broadly, which still has a great deal of power distance. You know, people are still very reverent to their leaders, to their managers, and frightened of speaking up, and frightened of making mistakes and not doing things on time. And I think what we find is that actually as a result of that, people are not putting forward their ideas. They don't want necessarily to take ownership of something because they're worried, and they're worried perhaps for their job security. They might be worried for their promotion, etc. So I think we have actually, as a region, we have to embrace this. Yeah. I think we have got to start thinking that if we don't start listening, especially to the younger generations, especially those who are more equipped with all this digital know-how, we are going to fall behind. Yeah. And I think equally, as more and more organisations, you know, certainly global organisations like ours are doing things like remote working and hybrid working, there's going to be more questions about, well, why can't we do that? Yeah. And then we're going to have leaders saying, well, I don't know how to manage people who are not sitting right in front of me. I've been used to working out, you know, for me, performance is that person arrives on time at work and leaves on time at work. You know, we've now got to start our shift towards organising by results and outcomes. Yeah. And this is a big cultural shift.
I think it is, to be honest with you, Amanda, and I think some of the notions there, some of the findings of that research seem to promote a more democratic way of life in the workplace, and a more inclusive way as well, where everyone's opinion is valued, and like you said, people are allowed to make mistakes. Yeah. But again, I think that alone, you know, focusing on these competencies, in my view, can influence culture greatly. But
hugely so. And we need to start at the top with our leaders. We don't actually start at the bottom with our staff. Yep. So, you know, when we've just been working with one particular ministry in a country unspecified, where, you know, the results of all the assessment work that we've been doing, we're going to be presenting to the chairman, actually, and we're going to be talking about the fact that he and his leadership team are creating the culture where change is not being enabled. Yep. And actually that culture is about diversity and inclusion. That culture is about learning agility. That culture is about, you know, managers coaching people rather than telling people what to do. So if we really want to achieve change, we've actually got to start with our leaders, and then our people managers, and then our staff. You know, because we can't just train people to take decisions, to take ownership, to be able to solve problems, to speak up, if the culture doesn't enable that.
Another one,
actually, sorry.
Another one your way, Amanda. This one says, how do we initiate this change and highlight the competencies that are now important? I know that you have you know, very good presence even in the media circles in the UAE, I think, through a TV channel as well as a prominent radio station. Does that help you highlight these competencies? Do you ever go on radio and tell people that's where you need to focus?
I've been known to. But actually, you know, we work a lot with the as you can imagine, with government and semi-government, and actually a lot of the leadership assessment work that we're doing, the leadership development work we're doing, obviously is not just about the leaders as individuals. You know, when we have an entire team, we're able to start saying to those organisations, you know, this is the culture you're presenting, because it's, you know, a set of 20 individuals forms a culture, and if there's a prominence that shape of behaviour, if you will, at the leadership level, that's effectively going to define the culture that individuals find themselves working in. So actually, you know, in all of our work, you know, when we are actually going to present assessment results, you know, we have, and we obviously always provide feedback, and in those feedback sessions we're not only giving them feedback about their qualitative and quantitative results, but we're also getting feedback from them about how can we as the organisation and as our client effectively support you. And the most common thing we hear is, my manager doesn't listen to me, or my manager could support me by giving me more feedback or more opportunities, or an opportunity to go and do this project over here. Well, now, how do we get that feedback? Because a lot of leaders are saying to me, I don't have time.
Sorry to interrupt you, Amanda, but just there, right there, Ali's asking, is there a way or a route that an employee can take to influence their leaders? And how can they do that?
Well, that's a great idea, actually, Ali. I mean, I think obviously, if we can actually get an audience with our leaders to talk to them about this, it might start with our line manager. And I agree with you. It probably has to be a benevolent line manager. It's not all line managers that are going to feel safe enough to hear criticism from their staff.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, or suggestions from their staff, doesn't even have to be framed negatively. It could be constructively, of course. But not all line managers are equipped to learn that or to listen to that. So it might be, if you have got a good HR team, perhaps you can go and talk to them about your ideas for how we can encourage leaders or managers to be more open to listening and to giving feedback and to thinking about staff and not feeling threatened by that. Because I do think that, there's two things here. One is leaders need to feel more comfortable. So we need to create psychological safety for them. Yep. And the second thing is we need to give them time. A lot of leaders, we had a leader actually assess just literally last week, and they came into the office, and the first thing she said to us is, I've had to take a day off to attend this assessment centre. Because she's not been given enough time to actually sit down and get him and do the assessment and come and see us. So it's about creating that sense of psychological safety, not only for staff, but also for leaders, and creating enough time for that so that they have the bandwidth to really get involved in terms of teaching and thinking about assignments and creating opportunities for people and giving people feedback. Yep. So I think we have a long way to go, but I think we're getting there. We're now talking more and more about diversity inclusion, which I think is terrific. And I think equally, we're now clearly shifting towards this kind of remote and hybrid working, which I think has, again, changed the format for a lot of organizations.
Well, I think the necessity of change is forcing us to change right now, and is happening. Many ways of doing, of doing work are changing, and only organizations that are inclusive enough and they're ready to be stared in the eye and criticized and be given therefore opportunities to improve and act quickly, react really fast, are going to prevail. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, 7 competencies that are going to shape at least the next decade, and that's a recipe for you there. Fantastic. And I'm just glad that the second of these was learning resilience, and how much learning needs to become part and parcel of your daily life, and how much little time you have. Our next topic is going to be about continuous professional development, CPD, to you and me. And I think we're just gonna take a break for a few minutes, and we're gonna be back at 3:40 because we have with us Brenda Power. And Mrs. Brenda Power is somebody who's been in the industry, and she's done it at different ends, the public, the private sector. I'll tell you more about her, but right after the break. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the questions, everybody.
See you in a bit, everyone. Let's be back at 3:40, please. See you later.
Okay.
Great. Hannah, are we alone?
No, I'm here. I shall go though.
I mean, yeah.
I shall go.
Oh, okay, cool. We'll be back then.
Hi.
Hi there.
Can you see me?
I can see you. Yes, I think we have some of the guests back already. We're gonna be starting again in a minute. Are we good, Hannah? Are you there, Hannah? Anyways. So. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Just before the break, Amanda was sharing with us the findings of the PSI research, which revealed the 7 most relevant competencies for the new world. And amongst them is learning resilience, like we said, Brenda. Brenda is our next speaker, and Brenda is somebody who started off as a executive trainee at Marks and Spencer at their flagship store. Is that correct, Brenda, in London? Many people from this part of the world will be familiar with that shop.
That's right. Yes.
We have so much loyalty to Marks and Spencer still, but basically Brenda started her trade there, and quickly she was responsible for the management and training of a chain of 750 retail stores, and she continued her career later on by joining the UK Government Training Board, where she also worked with small and larger organizations alike to support them and provide them with business consultancy. I think at some point after that was a big milestone in your career, I guess, Brenda. That was when you moved to the Accor group of hotels, and your work helped the group expand from 16 to 60 locations or hotel hospitality operations around the world, or is that just in the UK?
Just in the UK.
Just in the UK. And one of the things that happened there is that eventually a core group received the Investors and People Award, which is, to those who haven't heard of the Investors of People, it's a recognition of what you do for the advancement and progression of your employees and how embedded that is in your own system. Interestingly enough, in the next paper, we're going to hear from somebody who is very connected to that award. But for now, we have Brenda, and Brenda will be highlighting the significance of continuous professional development and how it's even more relevant now, and how it would help raise your value to your, not just to your organization, but even to yourself individually, and help you progress your career. So over to you, Brenda. Tell us all about it.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. So good afternoon, everybody. So yes, my name is Brenda, and today I'm presenting from much further away. I'm presenting from Oxfordshire here in the UK. I am based in the UK, as Yusuf said earlier, but also in Bahrain. These days I work as an independent consultant. So I have clients here in the UK, in the US, and also in Bahrain. Missing Bahrain so much, the sunshine and especially its people. Anyway, the title of my presentation today is Continuing Professional Development During a Pandemic. Hereafter, I'll refer to that as CPD. I'll be approaching this presentation very much from a practitioner point of view, someone who, puts things into play. Well, we all know that COVID-19 has caused unprecedented upheaval over the past year. The L&D functions in companies have been faced with significant challenges. This has meant that employees are so much more responsible now for their own L&D, and obviously then so much more responsible for their own career development. Okay, 18%, what is this about? Well, Sarah alluded to the same research that I've obviously read, which was carried out by the CIPD in collaboration with Accenture. And this research, one of the figures that jumped out at me is that only 18% of companies think their learning strategy, investment and resourcing will go back to what it was before the pandemic. So this looks like CPD, L&D is set to remain with the individual. I will be referring to this research study again later on in the presentation, and at the end provide you a link to this research at the end so that you can read its very interesting report for yourself.
Okay, do you have sorry to interrupt there, Brenda, but do you have any slides?
I'm going through slides. Are they not being visible?
No, they're not being visible. So if you want to try and upload them again.
Okay, I'll try again. Okay.
No problems.
So, can you see them now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So I'm working through these slides, thinking that you could all see them.
Go ahead. You want to expand them as well? You can do that.
Okay. So are we back on track now? The 18%. Yes. Can you see them now?
We can see that.
Oh, brilliant. So in the chat box, maybe you could put what challenges have you faced with maintaining your CPD during the pandemic? And hopefully during this session, I will cover some of those methods you might like to think about to enhance your own learning opportunities. And of course, you can ask questions at the end. So the overview, looking at the agenda, and there's no need to take notes, we'll be posting copies of the slides. I will look at what was the old normal and then move to what is the new normal or perceived new normal, and then on to what's next for CPD and the implications for you. As we go through the next 20 minutes, it will be good if you can think how this content may relate to your own learning situation. Throughout, I'll be using second person tenses. So I'll be saying you or the employees concerned. At the end, I will leave you with some tools for CPD going forward. And I think some of these tools might help you. One is a self-assessment for your career and the other is a skills assessment. Both of those come from Harvard. So just looking back, let's remember CPD. Why do we and why did we ever do CPD? First of all, I think important, credibility. It's important to be seen as competent to your profession, to your colleagues, your company, and your clients. Stay relevant and up to date. I think there's a big need to be aware of changing trends and directions in your profession. And both last speakers have talked about that in great detail. But I want you to imagine if your doctor or say your dentist or your surgeon didn't stay relevant and up to date, how confident would you feel in going to them for a consultation? So that's important that we stay up to date. Confidence. It's important to be seen as adding value to your profession so that you feel confident about what you do and your performance reflects that. And also, CPD helps us to gain new perspectives. So focused CPD opens you up to new possibilities and maybe even a career change. Who knows? Okay, old normal, where we used to place our focus. So the old normal for L&D initiatives were that we were heavily reliant on the workplace environment and based on physical gatherings. A massive 70% of learning was through job-related experiences, enabling people to discover and refine their job-related skills. A person was allowed to make mistakes at work and learn from those mistakes, and very possibly, receiving feedback and coaching to help improvement. Only 20% of learning happened through exposure and interaction with others. So this includes social learning, coaching and mentoring and collaborative learning. Surprisingly, I think only 10% of learning under the old normal came from off-job training courses and education. Most likely you're going to be familiar with the CIPD model, a simple 7-step cycle where people were mostly thinking about their own job description and how to progress. So usually starting at the identify and plan point and moving around the cycle to gain experiences and make progress. This model will still be useful in the future, but may not be restrictive to one job role. If you'd like more on this model, it's freely available on the CIPD website. So moving on to February 2020, then came coronavirus. Not saying it started then, but sadly, the first case was in Bahrain, was noted on the 21st of February 2020. This COVID-19 was to have a huge impact globally, and the workplace changed dramatically as we reacted to the unknown. So what happened for the workplace? This research is carried out by Harvard, and their definition of the 3 stages affecting business during COVID. So first thing, there was an emergency. COVID happened. The thinking was act now, safeguard the business. This pandemic has caused an economic crisis globally and had a devastating impact on the jobs market. Companies had to be reactive at this point. We've seen a loss of jobs, uncertainty that has left people's livelihoods at risk. This has had an effect on the long-term health, both physically and mentally, of employees. Recent research carried out by Franklin Covey found that 43% of people say their mental health has worsened in the beginning stages. Social distancing has meant, if possible, we should all work from home, and therefore on-job training stops. So how people learn is changing massively. Second point, regression. So regression, when people regress backwards, they focus on then the bones of their job description, achieving things on a much slower level. They don't go into thinking so much, or creativity or innovation and so on. There's a loss of interaction with colleagues. new and not always welcome ways of working. People have had to rebalance their home lives when they're home working with family life, mentioned before earlier, children being homeschooled, etc. Not always easy to balance your job with your home life. The final stage for Harvard, I was saying, is where we are now. Lots of people thinking about what comes after, what's relevant in the future, what's the new big picture or the new normal. So basically a time to renew. So 3/4 of organisations had to change their L&D strategy and resources in response to the pandemic. For many, there's no going back. As we said earlier from the CIPD research, just 18% think things will go back. So therefore, it's a time to renew completely. And the previous speaker, Amanda, was looking at competencies for the future. There will be less funding for CPD, precisely when we need it most. 1/3 of organisations report reductions in budgets, L&D headcount, and the use of external consultants. But on the upside, this can also present an opportunity for the employee to take charge of their own professional learning and focus on what really matters to you and your professional career. So a time to refocus and reflect. This has been mentioned by Sarah, first speaker, a switch to full digital delivery. And also, I think Amanda alluded to increasing in how people are caring for each other, how bosses are phoning up to check how we are. Basically, a refocus is what's healthy for the future working life. However, for some organisations and their learning teams, the crisis has proved to be an opportunity of greater proportion, and some say their learning strategy is much now more closely aligned with new business priorities. On an individual level, companies are going to have to deal with people's fears to go back to the physical work environment. I think that's something that a lot of organisations are going to have to think about in terms of occupational health. And there'll be much more limited opportunities for physical work experiences, which means we really do need to focus on relationships and collaborative learning online and in virtual classrooms. So there's an increase in opportunities for self-directed learning, for people to start taking ownership of the way they work and the way they learn. These words have been spoken about before as well. So 4 key areas for the future. So business leaders are talking about flexibility, security, resilience and sustainability. Leaders must see resilience as a strategic capability if they are to ride out any future disruptive events. Because the past year really with COVID has accelerated the future, it's brought the future to the here and now. So it's always important now to be way more proactive in all of these areas, and that's what's going to be key. This means supporting people development and supporting employees with their CPD when they are learning remotely. While this research is global, I know from colleagues and my husband who's working in Bahrain that the same issues do apply in Bahrain. Companies must be agile and resilient and use this evolving digitalisation of the workplace to create sustainable working cultures for the future. I know that Unilever, one of my clients, are just one large global company that are looking at this model. So maybe it's a time for all of us that we should widen our experiences and look at becoming flexible. So not having maybe one fixed job role, but being able to work on specific assignments where necessary to support the business. So this has to have a significant impact on CPD. Sustainability means we are going to ensure long-term viability. This pandemic has been a catalyst for so much change, and we need to ensure that it's a positive catalyst for success in the future. So the idea may well be to have a talented and flexible pool of people who can fit where needed rather than just one job role. The flexibility and agility come into play there. Therefore, it's a time to focus on our individual potential. So it's a time for reinvention, to reflect, renew and reset our own paradigm of potential. This model is a well-used model by Gartner, shows that we all have abilities, i.e. our skills and our technical proficiencies, our standards, our quality of output and our performance at work. And these are the things that bosses think about. And we all have aspiration. So for us, it's our career, our ambitions, our dreams, our goals. Where do we see ourselves in 5, 10 years later, or before we retire? We have our own personal aspirations, and these are the things that employees think about. And we are hopefully, or should be, all engaged in our workplace. That is showing a willingness to work, to be motivated in all that we do. So the middle portion here, where these 3 circles overlap, is about our potential. What's important about this model is, if you imagine it like a stool in your kitchen that's got 3 legs, all of these 3 areas should be evenly balanced. If they are out of balance, for example, if you have, say, the aspiration and your dreams for your future, but not the skills, well, then you won't be showing your full potential. Or you may have the ability, but not the engagement, and then the same thing happens. So it's really important in terms of CPD, if you want to be noticed, is to tap your own potential. But, well, it's all well and good to be recognised as a high potential employee. A person needs to show this, though, in their performance. So it's not about, your career aspirations or your ability or your engagement. At the end of the day, it's based on performance. So what we learn as we explore our CPD has to be seen in practice in your performance. Your CPD is not just for you to know, but it's to show what you've learned and how you can apply it. So what's next? I think the important thing to say here is, don't wait for someone else to manage your career for you. Here's your chance to manage your own destiny. Now that we are all removed from the whirlwind, if you like, of office or work life, we have much more time to reflect and think about what's important to us to become agile. What are our aspirations? What do I need to learn from my current work, or learn about new sectors by researching or working with, new clients? Whatever you're doing, it's important to take time to reflect on your learning and see how is that serving you for your future. So as Sarah alluded to earlier as well, there are formal learning methods, and she showed a few. I'm going to recap on those. And then there are informal learning methods. So some of the formal learning methods, webinars, such as we are on now today. Maybe if you have the skills and the abilities, deliver a webinar on your professional topic. Virtual workshops, online research, there's professional journals, ebooks and toolkit sets. Again, I know that Harvard have a whole range of ebooks and toolkits to help. Maybe ask for feedback from management and job rotation. So there's no better way really of learning about a job than being in the shoes of the person who normally carries out that work. Maybe join a mentor scheme. You could upskill with an online training course, coaching sessions, dial-ins. This is quite a new and exciting area. In one of my past roles as HR director for the Accor Group, I would visit units on, various occasions. We would call them open table meetings. And at the open table, I would come in and select a person from each department to sit down and have lunch with me. And let's talk about, how the business is helping them, how we can support them, what would they like more from us at the head office about. So nowadays, there's a new system called dial-ins, and I know this is happening in the Ministry of Defence here in the UK. where the leader can't be there sitting at the open table. So now they'll use this as a telecom opportunity, so that people can dial in and talk with very senior leaders if they can't actually meet them in person. You could book on a chartership workshop. CIPD is an example of that, or accredited learning, such as the Chartered Institute of Management. Blue sky thinking, I think this one is really quite interesting. Blue sky thinking is famous from a company called 3M and a lot of tech companies. So certain employees in the company are granted company paid time to invent a new product, a new service, or a new process for the business. This requires staff to develop their skills in research, innovation, pitching, calculated risk-taking, collaboration and financial modelling. So this helps to develop not only new products, but also the entrepreneurial skill and mindset of individuals in the organisation. Might work with some organisations, why not suggest it? Taking part in CPD activities during lockdown is a valuable way to structure your day, maintain mental focus, and stay up to date with activity across your sector. Moving forward, some of the informal learning methods. So we've discussed that, relationship and human connectivity are even more crucial in the digital era. Collaboration with peers and management to drive performance is key. So a lot of these areas have already been discussed, so I won't go through them again. But so we could do gamification. So if you have a subject, I don't know, like health and safety, you might invent a quiz or a game to make that a learning opportunity for individuals. So there's all sorts of formal and informal learning methods that it's possible. Well, it's all well and good doing all this CPD, but what is super important is that we capture this learning, that you record every aha moment, every small breakthrough. It's important to capture. Effective learning requires evidence gathering to underpin decisions and enhance your career. So it's important to gather and report both quantitative numbers evidence and qualitative narrative evidence. So recording achievement just demonstrates that you are getting it right, that you are addressing your own L&D needs. Evaluation is also vital to ensure that what you're doing is worth it. You might remember your PDR or your appraisal system in your organisation, and we should be keeping maybe even paper learning logs that would help you to do that. So in summary, the legacy of COVID-19 will definitely be a move towards the online development of online conferences and learning events, virtual peer groups, we've talked about virtual CPD support networks, opportunities to develop and improve self-directed learning. The take-home message is that this is a time for a renewal, not returns to what was, and that CPD has never been more important for your future than it is now. So it's really too early to say how things definitely will change, but we do know people will change and adapt. We do know they will and they must. The world is changing and digitalisation is here to stay. Okay, last thing here. I said at the beginning that I would leave you with a link to the research study carried out by the CIPD and Accenture. Very interesting read. And also remember the tools I said I will provide. One is a skills assessment, the other a career assessment. They're very interesting forms that can help you to see, are you on the right track for your particular development, for your career goals, for your aspirations and your future. So bear in mind what I already said, really, that while this research is global, it's also very valuable for the workplace in Bahrain.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brenda, for that. I think, I don't know, but I've been noticing that more than a couple of years before the pandemic started, I've seen a much higher level of acceptance from individuals who are of the CPD opportunities and of taking charge of their own development. Let me be very honest about it. We have seen, I don't have the exact numbers to prove it, might be wrong, but training spend in the past 2 years mainly contributed to by the pandemic and the level of some uncertainty and clarity with organizations. Training spend has decreased. But in the middle of all of that, I'm seeing more and more people taking charge of their own development and realizing how continuous professional development is playing a role in increasing their own value and making them ready to respond when twists and turns happen, and they're still able to perform well. But one of the main issues about CPD, Brenda, is the recognition of the learning on one hand, but on the other hand, for some organization, it's proving the worth and relevance of CPD and the difficulty organizations face to prove how useful these CPD units. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So as I sort of said earlier, it's about what you show you can do. It's about what you put into practice, the results that you actually achieve. That's what's important. That's what, when people will take notice of, you know, your performance at work. And the evidence keeping, I can't stress enough, because if we think about performance reviews, most people, most bosses as well, will remember the last month that the employee worked. They're not thinking about the entire year's performance. So keeping evidence diaries, for my direct reports, I always kept a journal with a page for each employee that reports to me. And at any significant point in the year, be it positive or negative, obviously I wouldn't leave negatives to roll over till appraisal. They would be discussed there and then. But my whole ethos was to bring up real positives, impact on performance, impact on results of the company, that I could talk to them about their achievements in their appraisal process. So yeah, I think the feedback and the reward process, because we brought into play performance related pay as well. So therefore, if you're going to do performance related pay as an initiative, you have to be able to back up a pay increase or award with tangible performance.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think with that, Brenda, that leads us really nicely to the next topic, which is reinventing your career. And I think we can disagree little that CPD will help you be in that position and help you reinvent your career if you ever need to, and also even plan for that ahead. But really useful what you've shared with us, Brenda. We really appreciate that, and I don't see any more questions in there, but we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And unless you have anything to add, we'll move on to our final part of today's webinar.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brenda. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us and hanging on, because in the next paper, we're going to play host to Miss Angela Mulvey, who's a renowned HR consultant, somebody who's predominantly served in the fields of leadership, in the fields of learning and development, including performance management and senior executive development. She's also spent time in academic circles delivering learning through UK universities, and she's also published 3 titles, 3 books previously, the latest of which is the one entitled Growing Talent Amongst Age Diverse Employees in 2021, so very, very recent. Angela will be sharing with us her thoughts about how careers can be reinvented and how they are changing at such a rapid rate. She's going to be telling us about her own experience and story with that and how she herself was able to reinvent that as well. So over to you, Angela, looking forward to that.
Good afternoon, Yusuf. I'm just going to, if I may, put up my slides.
Please go.
Make sure that you've got those.
Sure. You know, we love those slides. You know, I've got many comments about people wanting copies of those presentations, and we're going to make sure that we make them available to you. You know,
have they come up, Yusuf?
Not yet, but it says end of slideshow. So maybe you need to rewind a little bit. It says end of slideshow.
I think that's from.
Oh, that's probably
Brenda's.
from Brenda.
Yes.
Brenda, if you're still there, may I ask you to just take down your slides? Can you do something at your end, Hannah? No. Brenda, if you're still there, may I ask you to take down your slides so that Angela can use hers?
I think she's possibly gone, Yusuf. What can we do?
I can still. Do you see a button called request control?
Yes,
Angela?
yes. I've just clicked that. Let me see
charge.
if that. I'll take charge. Let me just see if that's working. I've clicked it.
It's at the top of the screen. You found it.
Yes, I've got it. It's just telling me it's waiting for approval.
Whose approval? Hannah, can you help there?
Brenda has to approve it.
Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Won't take long.
Try it again. I'm just trying it again, Yusuf.
Okay, Hannah, if you take charge, if you take control, take the slide out, and then we'll hand over to. Yeah, great. Now take it off. Now it's all yours, Angela. You can put up your slides now.
Okay. Hang on.
We've got them. Go ahead. You're good.
Great. So we'll start at the beginning. Excellent. Thank you. Can you see the slides now?
Positive, ma'am.
Super. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being patient. I'm the last speaker this afternoon, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for staying the pace, as it were. We've had some very interesting talks today, and in fact what I'm going to talk about, which will have a very practical focus, I think builds on a lot of what the previous speakers have already talked about. So what I'm going to do is start by just perhaps recapping for you on what I understand a career to be and the different stages involved in that. And I'm also going to mention very briefly what I'm calling self-managed development, which is really something that's already been touched upon, the need for people to take the initiative and to look after themselves and their own careers now in the current marketplace. So I'll say a little bit about how the focus of career planning has changed. I'll talk to you about how to identify your skills and attributes. And I think also what to do about your level of motivation. To me, that's a key element here. If you want to take charge of your career and you've thought through what you want to do and where you want to go, there has to be some motivation that only you can drive forward here to make things happen. I'll also touch briefly on some practical hints and tips, and I'll tell you a little bit also about my own career journey and some of the lessons I've learned. I'm really getting now to the end of my working life and looking down the tunnel of retirement, which in itself is quite challenging. But I don't think it matters what age and stage you're at. Taking ownership of your career is really very important. So my talk is going to be very much on what individuals need to do rather than what an organisation needs to do for its employees. So let's start by thinking about what is a career. Well, the first point on the slide suggests it's a sequence of employment-related positions, roles, activities, and experiences encountered by a person throughout their life, and we assume their working life. Now, people will obviously dip in and out of employment. For example, some people will take time out to have a family. Young people may take, pre-COVID certainly, time out to do gap years, etc. Experience, and we need to find ways of working with that when we're considering the next move for ourselves and how we're going to actually achieve this new career. Career planning, career management, if I can put it that way, has historically been very employer-led, and that's the way it was when I, for example, many years ago now, left university. There were many graduate jobs available. You had a choice. You went into a career, and in those days, probably, not always, may have considered even staying with an employer for all of one's working life. And that would mean that you would get to know that organisation well, they would get to know you, and you would have regular performance reviews, etc., and perhaps some promotions. We tend to think of careers as historically certainly having an upward progression. And in the past, that's the focus that's been taken by employers for career development has often been around what's been done for managers, middle managers, senior managers. But I think it's fair to say that career planning and career development now is available at lots of different levels. And what will happen now is people will cross the occupational divides, they'll cross organisational boundaries. And there has been, again pre-COVID, a lot of movement of personnel. In Bahrain, where I lived and worked for a number of years, you have many Bahraini companies, but you also have many global organisations represented with a staff coming in and out and a change across of expatriates. And all of that movement, if you like, I think has helped both organisations and the countries they find themselves in grow and develop. If we think about the second point, though, I think it's fair to say that now, given current circumstances, it's true to say that people themselves now need to take much more ownership of their career. Your career won't last the lifetime it used to do in days gone by, certainly not in the current climate. And for older people, it's worth saying that it's probably much more difficult to make the moves to new areas, partly because of age discrimination, something I researched for the most recent book, but also I think for economic reasons as well. Now, if we think about self-managed learning and what that means and relate that to career development, I haven't put this on the slide, but I was going to just quickly give you a definition from a very eminent educationalist, Malcolm Knowles, who some of you may know of. He defined self-directed learning, and I think this applies completely to self-directed careers, as a process in which individuals take the initiative, with or without the help of others, in diagnosing their learning needs formulating learning goals, identifying human and material resources for learning, choosing and implementing appropriate learning strategies, and evaluating the outcomes. Now, he's writing there about the learning process for individuals, but I think all of those elements in that definition link very nicely into, or apply, I should say, to career development as well. The fourth point on the slide, this really is very much linked, I think, to the economic conditions we find ourselves in, and even some sociological and political changes that are going on. Unforeseen circumstances might arise. Now, clearly, COVID has been the big issue for all of us. In my own case, for example, I used to regularly come to Bahrain with work. I have a long connection indeed with BIBF and with Strathclyde University, who run their MBA out of BIBF as well. Because of travel restrictions, I've been unable to do any of that, and it's all having to be done long distance. So, like many of us, I also am having to learn the new skills of working this way digitally. So our individual career hopes, aspirations, and our priorities will be determined in part by these circumstances we find ourselves in. But they're also, I think, partly to do with the background we come from. They're certainly age-related. I think they have to do with the financial commitments we find ourselves involved with at a particular stage in our lives. It's also about lifestyle choices. For example, some people don't want to remain in, or indeed even go into, a corporate environment. And with the hybrid working that's now coming down the line very quickly for many people, this, I think, will, excuse me, this will remain to be the case. So the future life plans that we have, and linking them to our careers and where we want to be, become very important. But if we put COVID to one side for a moment, there could be other circumstances like redundancy. Over the years, I've done a lot of redundancy counselling, coaching with managers, did a lot of that actually when I was in the Middle East, with people who've lost their jobs through no fault of theirs, restructuring in the business, whatever. People have to relocate. Perhaps a partner has a job that's been offered elsewhere. That's what happened to me. So I had to reinvent how I was going to operate in a completely new country. Things like ill health as well might impact on how we make these choices. So whatever the circumstances, what's key is the last point on that slide. We have to be ready and prepared for these situations. So what are we going to do? Well, I've called this for my talk the self-identity review. If you are looking to make a change to your career, there's some very basic, simple questions you need to ask yourself. Who am I? What is it I do? And what have I got to offer out there in the marketplace? That, of course, is going to take you into thinking about the skills that you have and what sort of new areas. And we've heard a lot this afternoon about the need to upskill in the digital area and so on. I think with the second point, the skill set I currently have, when people perhaps start to look at new opportunities and new roles, then one thing they will do is to consider where advertisements, vacancies are arising and what the skills and competencies are attached to that particular opportunity. But it's not just about knowing the skills you have, it's also about really understanding what is it I want to do. And that's about balancing the needs you have to earn money and help support a family perhaps, balancing that against what you really, really would like to do. You might want to become a brain surgeon, but that might not be realistic. So you have to think carefully, and without losing the dream of what you might want to become or to be, you have to be, through your preparation, doing this in a very realistic fashion. How you will, or what will help you do that, in my opinion, is to know and understand the marketplace you want to be in. I can't emphasize enough to you this afternoon the importance of doing your research. So if you do want to make a complete change from A to B, then you need to start and understand what is the job like in that other environment. What are the parameters of the role? What are some of the, the downsides, etc. And one of the ways that will help with all of this is to either use the network you have, I'll come back to this point later, to enhance contacts or indeed create a new network. One of the most common questions I've found in many years is when you're going for an interview, the interviewer will ask the question, where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years' time? Now, if I'm applying for a job in a corporate world, I want to be realistic in my response to that. And I'm going to obviously phrase it to show that I want to be with that organization I'm applying to. But from an HR point of view, one does have to perhaps query the validity of that question for a particular role. People may not always answer that as honestly as perhaps we might like them to. So what can we actually practically do? Well, one of the things I suggest is a simple approach that you'll all be familiar with, and that is to undertake a SWOT analysis, but a personal SWOT analysis. Again, working over the years with and helping through coaching, helping people to rethink their priorities and their levels of motivation. How they're going to get from A to B means that they have to consider the strengths they have, the weaknesses, and then look at the opportunities and the threats. So if we think about the strengths we have, there are various means of self-assessment we can use. Many of these, of course, come through the use of psychometrics. I think Brenda already mentioned some tools for career planning. Many of you, through your current employers, may be subject to assessments as part of performance reviews and so on. So things, for example, I just mentioned one that I'm particularly like is the Clifton Strengths Assessment. It used to be known as the Clifton Strengths Finder. Don Clifton was a very eminent psychologist. He set up an American company, SRI, Selection Research Incorporated, who of course many years ago bought over Gallup. And Gallup now is one of the largest global analytical companies in the world. They have many tools in the market they use for identifying talents, and individuals as well as organizations can obviously opt to undertake these sorts of tools. Another very good source would be feedback you currently get from an existing manager you have, or feedback from peers, feedback from other sources. But you need to accept the feedback. It's often quite difficult. It might be constructive criticism, but you need to get some objective view of who you are, where you are, and how you're currently operating. So filling up your strengths box, you've got some tools you can use. Now the weaknesses one, well, we all have these, and we have to think about the lack of particular skills we have. That might be a need to upskill in the digital arena. It might be other related, I don't know, self-presentation skills, all those kinds of things. Lack of experience in a particular field would be a clear weakness if you're wishing to make a move from one job role to a very different other one. Another weakness could be the poor levels of motivation you have. You might like to talk about making these changes, but can you actually harness your ability to make it happen? I always have said to, whether it's managers I'm training on programs or the MBA students at BIBF who I would be teaching, I always say to them, you are in charge of you. And that's something I would say relates very well to this conversation today about career management and career change and reinventing your career. Nobody can do this but you. You have to take charge. So you need to think about the opportunities that there could be that will enhance your ability to make that move. And that is all about understanding what are the best skills to have for a particular role. And it might be that you've got something that you've never really done before. Let's say project management. Well, there's courses and programs and you could learn how to work with projects, but you may have less experience. So again, you have to find ways of getting more experience, and that might be where you could use some existing contacts to ask if you could actually spend time really just watching and listening, maybe get somebody to do a bit of mentoring for you. The threats box on your SWOT analysis, well, that's one is about thinking through what is going to stop me. And it could be the motivation one I mentioned, which I put under the heading emotional. It could be personal. I mentioned the MBA, but there's lots of other types of master's degrees. Often mature students who choose to do an educational program of that kind have to attend evenings, weekends away, etc. And that will eat into family time, one's personal life and so on. So you have to get a good balance between the possible outcome, which might be a completely new, exciting job in a different area, against how do you deal with the people you're kind of leaving behind when you're doing all that studying. So that example of, the personal threats might be too harsh a word, but certainly you need to think about the commitments and the level of commitments. There's also the financial constraint, possibly, of having to pay for expensive programs and everything else. So you need to think about what these threats could be and work out how you're going to operate with them. Now that SWOT analysis is really just for you, but it, I think, would form the basis of any strategy you might then take forward with regard to the changes in career that you wish to make. I'm a great believer in the work environment of, when you talk about employee engagement, people are engaged if they are doing something that really excites and interests them. Some of you, I know I've done it myself, I've had to do projects, consultancy jobs, whatever, where I've done it and I've done it competently, but actually I really wasn't 100% there. When we're talking about reinventing your career, I think you really do need to work out what is it that I think I would like to do, and then work out how can I get into that field through the research, speak to people already in that job, ask if you could meet them for a coffee for half an hour. It's difficult in the COVID environment, I do understand that, but as things begin to ease, that might be more possible. Certainly work out what you need for entry to that area. And if you're going to make formal applications, then obviously you very probably need to think about possible revisions to your your CV. Often what people will do, particularly from my experience, people who faced redundancy and are looking for new opportunities, then they may almost adopt a scattergun approach, and there'll be many applications made. You need to be quite targeted and focused on what you're actually going to apply for. The methods of applications for jobs have changed dramatically. I mean, most of it now is done online. Sad to say, many employers don't even have the common courtesy to respond to applications. They just disappear into the ether and you never hear anything more from them. And that's very frustrating, and I do understand that. The cold calling one, you know, the scattergun thing is not honestly very successful. I'm a great believer in networking. That's one way that might help open a door to somebody else who knows someone who could talk to you about how to get into a particular area. The key question you have to ask yourself is, what's going to make me stand out from the crowd? What is it? Now, you've got to, you know, a well put together response if it's an advertisement, a well put together story of who you are, and so on. I remember I was running some training courses in the Far East. They were to do with selection interviewing for a group of bankers, I recall. And we were talking about these methods. And I'm going back probably 10 years or so, so it's quite some time ago. And one of them was telling me about an example they had of an application they had received, where a young person had put together sort of video clips, and you know, it was a very whizzy technological approach for that time. I mean, things obviously have moved on since then, but it was quite interesting to hear how a big global bank like that was actually entertaining and being quite enthusiastic about these differences in applications. I was reading or hearing just the other day, someone was talking about an opportunity in retail where the candidates were actually asked to have so many thousand followers on Twitter. Now that's an assumption that, you know, people have, that they first of all work with Twitter and they have those skills and they have the followers. So that's about working out what is it that's needed and what's going to make me be able to make these changes. And if I don't have any followers because I don't use Twitter, well, either that's not going to be an area I want to get into, or I'll have to do something about it. And certainly you need to be prepared for knockbacks. You need to have a strategy. It's going to take quite a while to make changes to your career. You may have to accept lower level salaries. You may have to take steps down, and that is quite difficult. But depending on how committed you are to finding something that really interests you and engages you, then perhaps you will be willing and able to do that. My own career journey, well, it's been a pretty mixed bag. I started my career in HR management. I worked in the UK in the manufacturing sector. I worked in the health service. Then I went into academic life for a while, which I really enjoyed. I liked the teaching, and I was very involved with CIPD at that point and did research. What I did not like were the politics of academic life, and after a while I thought I can't operate in this way. It's not business focused enough for me, and I left and I set up my own consultancy practice, and I've been an independent consultant ever since. I had an opportunity to move overseas at one stage, and I was in the Far East. I ended up living for a while in Bahrain and made some very good friends and some very good contacts there. I came back to the UK, goodness, I'm looking at my slide here, 2009, but I have continued until COVID came along. Really all my project work has been overseas, so a lot of traveling involved, but sad to say that has had to stop. And I've also reached a stage where I've had to think about, well, what am I going to do now? I'm not going to carry on doing consultancy of that kind. And I've, as Yusuf said, I've done 3 books now, 3 management textbooks, and I'm actually just starting to think about the next one. I enjoy the process of writing. I enjoy the research side of that. It's a lonely existence in one sense, but it brings lots of satisfactions too, and it's something I will continue to do. Now, in a way, that career wasn't planned as such, but it has given me great opportunities. One thing I did until very recently, I worked extensively with the International Quality Standard, IIP. I was an assessor, I was a trainer, and that has given me chances to work all over the world and meet some very interesting people and organizations. And I no longer, I just recently stopped doing that work, but again, that sort of grew out of a very, some work I had started, and it moved from there. So what lessons have I learned? Well, I'd like to think I'm still learning. I think a key message I give you is nothing lasts forever. So you have to embrace change when you're looking at your career and reinventing what it is you're going to do. I can't emphasize enough the importance of doing your research and preparing for what it is you're after. Knowledge and information are very powerful, in my opinion, here. You've already heard today the importance of continuing with your own CPD. Absolutely key, and even now I'm trying to do that for myself, working on some online courses and so on, even doing things like this exercise where I can sit in my office here in near Glasgow in Scotland, and I can be engaged with yourselves. Okay, Yusuf, I think that's all I want to say. I've somehow knocked the last slide. Are you there?
I'm there, absolutely.
Good.
There, and actually some of what you said actually hurt, because it just made me think back about the times that, if I'm gonna put it nicely, the times that I've reinvented my own career. It was more like chaos, to be honest with you. Because all I wanted to be in life was a graphic designer, and then I found out, no, maybe I should do something else, and I did that something completely different thing. And then I did something also completely different as a 3rd career. Now I'm into my 4th phase. I enjoyed it. I learned so much. Yeah. But then I think what you presented there, Angela, is that reinventing your career is not a spark of a moment. It is something that you plan for. Yes. And it's something that you make sure that you minimize the risk involved with through a number of consideration. Absolutely. It almost sounds like a very structured approach to reinventing your career.
What the last point, when I somehow knocked the slide and the questions one came up, I also wanted to say the last bullet point was be kind to yourself when things go wrong. We've heard this afternoon about the importance of resilience and sustainability and all these good buzzwords that we use. What's important is that you will be, there will be days when you've applied for things or you've thought you could do things and you can't, and you have to pick yourself up and move forward. So to me, those are really core attributes: resilience, feelings of self-worth in what you're trying to do. So I'm sorry I bumped the slide and missed that last point to make. Okay.
Fantastic. Angela, really appreciate that. That was such a useful insight. I know some of the people that are listening to this are thinking about their own situations, and this is the thing about this world. I think it's rare that people can just establish one single career throughout. Things will change. Yep. You will discover things about yourself that you never had known before. Yeah. And that's often puts you in situations where you ask yourself whether you are doing the right thing, whether you can do better elsewhere.
Okay, I mean, I think I'm quite an organized person, Yusuf, so I like to think there was some degree of structure, but personal circumstances made my now ex-husband's job, took us overseas. I had to deal with all of that at the end of it, and you come out of it and you can do other things. Yeah. Would I have gone overseas on my own? Possibly not. It became a great opportunity to become to do international consultancy work, and the learning from that I have taken forward, I think, into every job that I've had. By that I mean project job that I've had since then. So I think yes, the learning doesn't stop with the job change at all.
Well, with that, I think the learning never stops, and at BIBF we firmly believe that the learning never stops. We will make sure that this is the case, and I think having the opportunity of taking time off people like yourselves, Sarah as well as Amanda and Brenda, it's just been fantastic listening to what you people had to say today, and it just, I think overall it makes a lot of sense. I hope we didn't keep you for long, because we're slightly we're almost on time. We're exactly on time. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Angela. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for spending a few hours with us today. I hope it's been useful. I hope you'll be back soon, because we'll be exploring more areas and concepts in the next few months. We'll be announcing those, but it could not have happened, without contribution from such masterful speakers, yourself, Angela, and your colleagues before you. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Fantastic. And I'll see you all soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go too far. Keep following BIBF's Instagram and social media. You'll find out about more learning opportunities such as this in the coming few weeks. So take care. Good luck with your careers and all the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.